Well, welcome everyone. Namaste from Chicago, USA, and greetings to all of you in the Eastern Hemisphere as well. My name is Dr. Kalyani Gopal. I work with Safe Coalition for Human Rights, and I'm delighted today. And thank you so much for your patience. Technology is always wonderful. If we could just speak to each other in person, I don't think I had to worry about technology. So here we all are, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for waiting. Today we're going to speak to three survivors and an individual who is working in Afghanistan and now will be working in Bangladesh and has an amazing story to tell of his own. I will start with him, but before I start, I have a few housekeeping duties. One is after this event, please send us your evaluation form. I'll put that link on YouTube so you can see it. Complete the form, send it to us, and we will send you a certificate of attendance. Human trafficking, as you know, and some of you might definitely know, is a gendered event. Human trafficking is a gendered crime. 71% of all trafficking victims around the world are female. Yet labor trafficking, as Harold Souza will let you know, is hugely bifurcated with females and males, depending on what form of labor trafficking is going on. So without further ado, I'm going to move to Mr. Ashish Damle, who is here today from Oxfam International. Ashish Damle is a social impact entrepreneur, a champion, change manager, global level expert on the issues of human trafficking, child protection, missing children, internally displaced people, bonded and forced labor, and refugees with 20 years of work experience, including 13 years of international experience in leadership roles with international agencies. An eminent public speaker and a visionary who has been invited as member of experts panel by the World Youth Congress, Interpol, Global Conference, Lion, and the 12th SARC Law Conference in 2013, as well as Bhutan and multiple other conferences. He is a wonderful speaker, hugely experienced, having spent 15 years in India working on the ground, and then during the invasion in Afghanistan has spoken and trained folks in Afghanistan, especially during the Taliban times, which then continues. He's now in Bangladesh, and he'll be speaking to us about the operations he conducts on the ground. Ashish Damle, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalyani, and thank you, SAFECHR and other panelists. And greetings to all the viewers from different parts of the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon your time. Really pleased to be part of this convention and to have this opportunity to talk about the horrific incidences that are right now happening around the world and how this is impacting lives, particularly in the context of vulnerability, in the context of women, and also cross-border crimes like trafficking. Uh, as we are speaking, the war in Ukraine is already going on, and huge news coverage is already being there to tell us the story. But maybe just to reinforce that whole thing, I can tell you some of my experiences from Afghanistan. I have been working there for almost last 8 to 10 years, and I have seen different, impacts, different kinds of stories of people in that. So I'm basically going to represent here is a collective voice of all these victims of trafficking, and those who are the refugees seeking some safe passage across the countries. So there are basically three dimensions that I would like to highlight in this particular context: that how war or civil conflict has impact the people. It sounds very easy, but these impacts are lasting for years and generations, and this is what we have been experiencing in Afghanistan. So my first entry to Afghanistan was in 2007, and at that time it was very peaceful. Of course, the country was shattered by war for over 2 or 3 decades. But then there was hope. New generation was coming up. They were aspiring to have opportunities, get educated. um, Institutions were coming in, businesses were getting set up. So basically that phase was in kind of nation building. And why I'm telling you this, because it takes huge amount of effort for people to gain confidence to come back and thrive their life. And we had seen this in Afghanistan, as many times it's being accused that when the refugees go out, they are unlikely to return. So in case of Afghanistan, there was huge returnees, and we were managing the operations of returnees to provide them resettlement and to provide them support that is needed after returning back to the country, and then engaging them with the that government schemes, etc. And while doing so, we have been interacting with youth, interacting with women, and we were uh, basically quite amazed to see that how do they see the whole positivity, despite all what they had suffered in when being a refugee, whether in Pakistan or in other places or in Iran. Uh, but now, after around 12 years of all the efforts that had been put in place of gender equality, getting legal instruments, the whole advocacy that has been done, the policies that have been framed, it's likely to get into the drain after this rule over of Taliban. And I was there seeing these things happening in front of me, and it was quite telling experience. First, it was all started in the remote places, in the provinces, where we had to suspend our programs. Especially women and girls were targeted. It was extremely difficult to even ensuring safe passage for their education. Uh, and as Kabul fell, the whole thing changed, and we had to witness uh, huge catastrophe among those who were so-called protected, educated, learned, who had money. That kind of community were reaching out to us to just give us one recommendation letter somewhere so that we can leave this country. We had seen that the doors of those houses where girls who have been above the age of 24 and who had not been married were being marked with white flags so that they can get forcefully married to the Taliban soldiers. These stories have not come up in the mainstream media, but this is what has happened to even our staffs who have worked with us in Afghanistan. And we had to basically extend our support and to see. Oxfam is of course not an agency that actively engages into immigration facilities, neither it has that kind of an authority. It's just an international organization, but what we could do is to raise our voice and to tell the governments in different parts of world, including the Europe and US, to accept them, to make it easier for these people to enter into these countries, because they are really, really suffering. And some places we have received positive response, but in many cases we haven't. So there are still our ex-staff, our partners who are in Afghanistan and still trying to work out their means to remain safe at this point in time. It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult to talk about women equality. They couldn't celebrate International Women's Day this time. There are repercussions around it in media. Their statement, Taliban statement, when the spokesperson speak and what they show is very, very different than what is exactly happening in the provinces, because one must understand that the whole cadre of Taliban has been engaged in fighting for last almost 3 decades, or two and a half decades, like since 1999 till date. And they have not been exposed to any mainstream education or anything that can basically help them open their views around the world. They're still having the same, their commanders still having the same old mindset that they had about 25 years back. And these commanders are being appointed as governors in the provinces. So whatever Taliban spokespersons say in Kabul is not necessarily being followed by their commanders in the provinces. So the situation in Kandahar, situation in Helmand, situation in Ghazni is quite traumatic. It's really very traumatic. Situation in Uruzgan, situation in Jozwan. These are the provinces names that I'm taking. These are the provinces where the story is worse than in Jozwan. Just around a week back, house raids have been carried out to find the musical instruments. That they are not allowing any musical instruments at home. They're banning televisions. So it's exactly what it was in Kabul. It's not like that. Kabul is still, there is a some international community presence is still there, but these are the provinces in which there is no such presence, there is no media exposure, and things are really getting worse. The second dimensions now in terms of the force and how these people come out, and what do they expect, when people, because we have been interacting with a lot of people, and they do see injustice. They are not party to this war. It's not their war. This is really very important for us to understand. In any place where civil conflict is taking place, it's basically a conflict between conflicting parties which are ideologically opposite to each other. But large population is of neither side. They have nothing to do with either side, and they just want to lead a very peaceful life. And they are the ones who are at the receiving end. They are the ones who are experiencing the brutality of war. Those who are engaged in physical fight, they have less to lose, but the people who have gained over the years, they have a lot to lose. So they have to leave their family behind. They have to leave their whatever earning that they have uh, gathered or accumulated over years, their businesses, their setup, their houses, everything they are leaving behind, and they are ready to go just because it's a question of survival. So it's not voluntarily migration. It's not that. At often it's been accused that people take advantage of the situation to seek greener pastures in the European side, and that's the reason people are pushing themselves to Europe or to US. It's not true. It's not true. That population is really very small who have confidence that once they enter into US or Europe, they can make their life because they have that kind of an education. But people who do not have, people have a lot in their own homeland. Their orchards are there. There are farmers there. They have nothing to do in Europe other than living in tents. So the very important part that the world community needs to understand is to recognize why people are seeking refuge. It's not a kind of adventure tour, or it's not a touristic approach, or they don't want an exposure, etc. The second important part is in terms of the justice. When we acknowledge that the situation is forced upon these people and they are vulnerable, then you can, this is basically the beginning, a possibility of justice. If there is no recognition of refugees, then there is no possibility of justice. So in terms of justice, it's very important to have a very first dignified life. Often even under UNHCR, they are given these cards, and people are using these cards whether they are in Pakistan or in other places, or what we see in Bangladesh with Rohingyas. But the treatment that is being given to these people is no less than a livestock. They're just being kept there alive, and that's not what the refugee life is all about. In case of Bangladesh, I can give an example of how these people are now being pushed into an island. That island is at the verge of climatic collapse. It may not sustain there after 3 or 4 years. One cyclone can hit the so it's basically a place which is dangerous, which is abandoned, which is unused, which has no resources, is being allocated for these Rohingyas, to get settled. The place can comfortably organize maybe 8 to 10,000 population, but more than 100,000 people are being expected to be there. So it's it's not right. And I get sometimes surprised and equally annoyed is because even the United Nations, go along with the lines that the government takes rather than protesting it, or rather than questioning the government and asking the accountabilities. They are not Bangladeshis, they are not voters there. So what does it, what difference it makes? They're still human beings, and they are there because they are in need. Uh, they have not come for a leisure. So it's important to understand these dimensions of people who are refugees, who are first human, and they are in need of dignity. Once you have that, then the third thing is in terms of the reintegration and rehabilitation. And often I have seen that these terms of reintegration and rehabilitation are defined from the political lenses, where many times, like in India, when they think that it's going to be another vote bank for them to get more seats in the next elections, the approach is towards welcoming them and reintegrating them into Indian society. But if they think that it is going to be very hurtful to the host community, and they may lose the chunk of votes, then the approach is exactly opposite. So it is driven by the political environment in that particular location, rather than the human rights instruments that are already in place. Nobody gives any major respect to these human rights instruments, and I'm using these words with quite caution. I know that there are fantastic instruments that are in place, and hundreds of countries are party to that. They are accountable, but in terms of implementation, is quite less. So this third important part is in terms of understanding these instruments and actually putting them in use with its true spirit, and not for the political. So it immediately becomes political when it comes to the rehabilitation and reintegration. And in order to address that, what is important is to have a true participation of this affected community. If they are own, they themselves are participant to this process. They know what is better for them. They know what they want from it. How do they want it? How it can be done for them. So it's very important to have these voices and to have multiple platforms for these voices to come together and to then recognize them, acknowledge them, and to ensure that these voices are registered. It's not just that giving them different platforms, but it's very important for these communities, affected communities, to come together and decide a bright future for them. And that vision needs to be supported by the international community. So these are the three important dimensions that I thought would set the pretext also, because after me, there will be people who will be talking from their own individual experiences. And I have just collected, set the context in such a way that it can help, audience to understand when they will share their own personal stories, how these stories are basically set into the larger settings. So that's all from my side. I have to apologize of leaving early because I have a flight to catch early in the morning. So sorry for that. But I will stay for another 5-7 minutes and then I will go. And if there are any question which is particularly for me, and if I cannot address, maybe I can request a panel member. You can send it to me and I will write them and send it to you back.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you very much. You make some very important points. And I think the overarching comment from you is that we need to have greater advocacy, and we need to have greater resources and more involvement by Western as well as Asian nations in terms of paying attention to those refugees who are trapped and caught in very horrific living conditions at this point in time. So thank you for raising that point and raising awareness about that. Um, and if you have questions for Ashish, please put that in the YouTube chat box, and we will forward those to him. He is traveling fairly soon, and he's going to help the Bangladeshis, the Myanmar area, very hotspot areas, and we wish you all the very best. So moving on, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Honorable Bakoko Bakuru Zoe. She's a former Minister of Gender, Social Development, and Labor in Uganda, and also a dear, dear friend, and a survivor of human trafficking, as well as a refugee who has made huge, huge changes in terms of how she's impacted the world with her stories and how she has shared some of those stories that have actually resulted in some concrete change. Her motto is touch one life every day and make a difference in the lives of the youth by empowering and mentoring them to respect life and live it fully. The title of her presentation is Experiences of Refugee Girls Over a Span of a Lifetime, Addressing Solutions to Gain Gender Equity. Honorable Zoe, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gopal. Thank you, listeners, for joining us in this very important discussion. Thank you, Ashish, for your opening up for the panel. My topic is the experience of a girl child as a refugee. And if we look at the thunder that is raining on the Ukrainians and how children, girls, women are paying the brunt for the conflict in Ukraine, it's just enough to see how much people suffer. And now for me, I cannot watch news, I cannot listen to news because it's triggering memories of what happened years ago when I had to flee my country and go into Sudan and Congo and leave my job and everything behind. Today, I am still a refugee. I miss my mom, bless her heart, the woman who protected me all those times, making sure that I hid with her in the bushes so that the soldiers would not rape us, making sure that she slept with me by the riverside at night with my young sister and other women so that women would not be violently raped and killed. I have some memories that are never erased from my mind. One of them is when I was very young and we were hiding from the liberators at the fall of Idi Amin. My own family had suffered from that government. I lost my father's two maternal brothers. They were killed in that government. But when the liberators came, they didn't care who had suffered. Everybody had to leave the country or you would be a victim and you could be killed. So one night we were sleeping by the riverside. All the women with their babies cuddled by their belly in the riverside on the grass. And the last woman with her baby, she assumed there was another woman beside her. And when dawn breaks, you all have to wake up and go because the soldiers will be on their way. And so you have to run. And as these ladies woke up to try and cross the river, the lady discovered that it was actually a python, not another woman next to her baby. So everyone freaked out. My mother with my young sister jumped, and all of us had to jump the river. And this woman just picked her baby by the leg and threw her over the river. And my mom was right there and she caught that baby and the lady jumped. And sometimes I believe when scripture says during such a moment, that God will lock the mouths of all the dangerous animals, including lions and everything, so that they won't hurt people. That was one moment that has always been in my heart. The next one is when I was working as an administrator in a 100-bed hospital. The rebels attacked the military, and then a war ensued. I remember there was no respect, even by the military, that this was a hospital with health workers working in it. They came shooting, and we had to escape. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, who is now in the Netherlands, married to a British. I started rolling. I didn't know. I just heard sounds. I didn't know these were bullets, and people were running very fast. I was left behind. And as I rolled and rolled, I started crawling. Then I reached under a mango tree and said, "You have to save yourself." I climbed the mango tree. 8 months pregnant. All those little red ants which bite people, and when they do, we call them Ascaria soldiers in my language. My body felt numb. I could not feel those red ants biting me. The soldiers came and crossed under that mango tree, following people who were running. The young men and everybody had gone. But they were tiptoeing because they thought some rebels might also be in the bushes and they could shoot them back. So they did not. I stayed in the mango tree. The soldiers went back. I slept in the mango tree. The next day, when those boys came back, they were ready to come and find my body, dig a small grave, and just cover me and go back to Sudan. I saw them from far, and as they tiptoed, I called. They tried to run back. I said, "Please don't. I'm up in the mango tree." They came and said, "Mommy, how did you get up in the mango tree?" I said, "I don't know." They said, "Come down." I said, "My belly hurts. I can't climb down." They had come up and helped me to come down. Eventually, we made it back to Sudan in about 2 days. There are so many experiences like that. I could tell them, and I just wish I had an opportunity to document them in a book so that people can understand the suffering, the gender-based violence that women face in conflict, so that people can stop engaging in wars, so people can nurture their egos and understand that when they rain bullets and thunder like they're doing in Ukraine, it's human beings, like they're doing in Afghanistan or wherever there's conflict, in Congo, in Sudan. These are human beings just like them. The people who propagate the wars, they should be able to understand that human life is involved. The destruction of property and throwing people in uncertainty gives opportunity to another level of people, the human traffickers, who take advantage of situations like that, knowing you are desperate, you need a house, a roof on your head, you need food, And for people like me who are sick, you need medication. And young girls and boys who have lost their education, that they would run when they tell them, I'm going to take you to a university, they will readily accept, not knowing that they are falling in the trap of a human trafficker or a sex trafficker. I think every year we come to the UN and talk about this. I have done it since I started coming to the UN in 1990s. We talk about this. We reinvent the wheel. We give a new name to it. But the truth of the matter is that the UN knows. The UN Security Council should be able to listen to the voices of the victims of human trafficking, of refugees, and countries who are member states of UN, and they go to the UN every year, whether like the Commission on the Status of Women, where the women's voices are raised every time, or the heads of government, the different arms. We can't do this every year. Something has to change. It has to change, but because the people who are suffering are humans like us, we can't be speaking and not walking the talk. We should be able to influence policy, ensure that wars don't erupt. People should find ways of building peace and being able to recognize these shimmering tensions between countries and ensure that they don't erupt into a war. They should be able to understand that you should not close your borders to people because this is not a choice. Do you think the people who are fleeing Ukraine now want to go to Poland? They want to go to those European countries? They want to live in their country. Nobody wants to leave their home. East, west, north, south. Home is always the best. You don't want to leave your home. You want to live in your home, in your country. All the situations that are creating these problems, I think countries have to work together and create socio-economic developmental programs that can stop some of these problems erupting. There should be accountability. How are we, member states of the UN, of the Security Council, going to ensure that we can have checks and balances on ourselves? That people are accountable to the treaties that they sign. That there's justice when somebody violates them. That they should be punished. Unfortunately, traffickers always go free. It's not just trafficking people for sex. It's not just trafficking people for labor. It's trafficking people for organs too. Can you imagine somebody taking you and killing you and cutting your organs and selling them? There's so much in this multi-billion-dollar industry that people have to stop, breathe, step backwards, and ensure that we can find ways of doing better as human beings. I'm just praying every day, because even here now I am displaced because someone chose to shoot a gun through my house. Who it was, I don't know. And now I must find a new place to live, I must find new doctors. If I did not have Dr. K as my therapist, I don't know what would have happened. My blood sugar levels are going up and down. For how long will a refugee bear the brunt? We are nothing, just statistical numbers. It's time we are called by our names. It's time we are recognized as human beings. It's time you reach out and at least empower one refugee and change their lives. And you will be grateful you did that. Thank you, panel, and thank you, listeners.
Honorable Zoe, as always, you have my greatest respect and the respect of all the listeners who have been on this recording here. And you've had so many comments and prayers being sent your way. And you are an amazing, amazing, amazing human being. And we will debrief after this event. For those who are listening, we're going to do a 1-minute breathing exercise to help all our survivors here on this call and all those survivors out there who are listening. We are here for you. We hear you, we see you, and we're here for you. To summarize what Honorable Zoe said, she's asking that we no longer just talk. We've been doing this forever. We talk all the time. And what do we achieve? Practically very little, in her opinion. So her question to all of us, her challenge to all of us, is that we have accountability. We become more accountable. We cannot close our borders. People do not leave their countries by choice. A majority of people leave their country by force and fear of persecution. Honorable Zoe herself is a political refugee in the US. And she asks us all to stop, breathe, step backward, and engage so that we do better as human beings. We can do better, we need to do better, and we'd better do better. And on that note, I'm going to move to our next speaker, and equal just as powerful as our Honorable Zoe, Judge Mary Beth Bullock, who at the age of 4 years old was trafficked by her own biological father. She fought through all the perpetrators, all the impact of all the perpetration that she experienced over the years, very determined, and as she would say, very ferocious, and very determined to finish law school. She completed law school. She's a Title IX expert, higher education, civil rights advocacy, a World Peace Ambassador for the USA, a federal civil rights judge, retired, and she's a child advocacy trauma victim witness, a coordinator, author, and she's written a book called Judging Me, which is now being made into a film. And she recently, a couple of days ago, sat down to do a series of PBS events, being interviewed by Dr. Vincent Folletti, who, as you know, has developed the ACEs that we are now revising. Her objectives in life are to be the best person she can be, she says, and I'm a fierce and formidable woman. I will let her speak for herself, as she's just a very, very captivating speaker as well. The floor is yours, Judge.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal. And may I say, Honorable Zoe, I want to come over there and give you the biggest hug. I love you to pieces, and you know that. My heart just went out to you and sunk to my stomach, and I said, we have to do something. I know what's happening in the Ukraine, the population in Poland, and how There's too many people and too little resources. Who is going to step in and help those people? I don't know. But somebody, not people like, I weigh 101. I can't possibly carry everyone on my back. I can't possibly put anybody in my 600 square foot apartment. They wouldn't fit. So I want you to know that my heart is with you, my soul, and I will speak to anyone I can about doing something to help these women and children, because they are the spoilage of the war, and they will be raped, maimed, killed, trafficked. That's what happens. So, and I thank Dr. Gopal as well. I was a domestically sex trafficked child. I was groomed by my father, who sexually violently abused me, burned me, cut me, did anything he could to mortify me. He would bring other people into rooms to do things to me that people in the dark of night would never imagine seeing. A couple of years later, he sold me to sex traffickers because I suppose he needed or wanted money. And that was the rest of my life, on and off, throughout grade school and high school. And let me tell you, sex traffickers have no moral compass. As you said, Honorable Zoe, they don't look at you as human beings. You are simply a commodity. Now, when I go to help people in sex trafficking here in the San Diego area, Southern California, the first thing we do, usually they're MS-13 victims, gang victims. And so we take them and remove the chip, because that chip tells them where their merchandise is. And you have to remove that chip. Secondly, sex trafficking today in the U.S. is enormous. They divide it up into domestic sex trafficking or domestic minor sex trafficking. And that's women and children, both who are scooped up, sometimes in bus stations and on the street, etc. But they know how to look for the vulnerabilities, and they play to those, and they will pledge their undying love, anything to get you to follow them. In my case, I was just kidnapped. I was sold. There I was, and couldn't get out. The sex traffickers manage to. There's a lot of them, and they usually are gang related. It is a criminal enterprise, and I was reading in some social justice magazine not too long ago that all the various social justice issues we have to deal with, that trafficking, sex trafficking, was a footnote. And I said, no way are we a footnote in anybody's dispersion of funds. That is just outrageous. So for a lot of my life, I lived in cages. They would display us naked on tables where people walked around and picked the victims that they wanted for the evening. Eventually, I was bought for a snuff film, which is somebody has paid money to kill you on camera. And of course, they're very well disguised, like wearing masks, like what was it? Hannibal Lecter. And it is the most frightening experience in the world to know that you are going to be next. And they prep you for that. And it scared me half to death. Scared me enough to where I could eventually take metal fatigue and try and work myself out of the cage. I was successful. The only part is that I had to run through the desert and stark naked. And the next car that came by, I didn't know. It could have been a sex trafficker. It could have been somebody buying sex. Or God forbid, it could be a nice person. I threw myself out in the middle of the highway. Luckily, it was the highway patrol, and they got me. Unfortunately, they sent me back to my parents. It could have been the worst thing ever. But that's a story for another day. What I am attempting to convey is that if there are something like 18 million or 25 million women and children globally that are sex trafficked in 1 year. Sex traffickers really like sex trafficking, and you want to know why? Because before they would sell AK-47s, drugs, but they have to replace those, don't they, when they sell one? A woman you can sell 30 times in 1 day, and you don't have to replace her. And that to me is horrifying, and that is what happened to me. 30 times in 1 day, really? You can't imagine what that does. It sears your soul down to the very quick. And to recover from that, if you recover, and I pray that the recovery rate depends upon how much support you have at home. People who understand, people who are willing to take you to psychologists, listen to your story, and help you. But if you have no support, which a lot of these women do not, then, like I did, I put myself through school. I mean, I came from a dirt poor family. I got scholarships to the University of San Diego, and I did a bachelor's of arts. I also got an MBA and a law degree. So, and now I'm getting a Title IX certificate, which is basically the same thing in higher education as a lot of Title VII, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, hostile work environment, etc. So, all I can tell you is that sex may be as old as time, but you can get these traffickers if you are only willing to post the pictures in the newspaper, say where they work, say who their family is, because I guarantee you within 48 hours he will be fired. He will be divorced. There's no way anyone who reads that would like to keep that fellow around. And when the police do that, if they would do that, people will think twice. Now, in one of the cases I was involved in, it was a young woman. She was 13 years old, and the police arrested her for prostitution, and they just called him a John and let him go. How that is fair, I don't know, because it isn't. Because that's the John, if you will, talked to the sex trafficker and said, "This is the menu I want," and she was told what to do. It was in daylight, in a recess amongst downtown, and the police saw them and came and arrested the young girl under prostitution. She was 13 years old. Really? I said to the judge, this makes no sense. You label her with prostitution, she won't go to school, a scholarship, rent a place. I mean, there'd be nothing for her, nowhere for her to go. So I said, please, you have to understand these are still children. And they are so damaged and traumatized that you just can't treat them as if they were criminals, because they're not criminals. And as a matter of fact, I said, I can guarantee you that several feet away in the recess was a sex trafficker with an AK-47 pointed at her. If she did not perform, she'd be dead. Period. They have no choices. And they will kill you. They have no moral compass, no compassion, no empathy, no values. The only value to them is money. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about has to do with the trauma involved and how women who might not have the support in the family can indeed do something to make themselves feel whole. And education is one of them. Education in our world has always been the way to get ahead. Secondly, it's making a commitment to something greater than yourself. My commitment was to help other sex trafficking victims. Even though I was a federal civil rights judge, that was what I did for a living, I knew I would spend the rest of my days working with sex trafficking victims. And because of people like Dr. Gopal and her organization, we actually have a place called the Ashley place? Ashley Home? And it's not like Child Protective Services where at the age of 18, there you go, you're off on your own. Dr. Gopal has arranged it where if these women need 10 years or 15 years, she makes sure they get the help, they heal, they're standing on their own 2 feet, they can go on interviews and become, as best as possible, live a normal life. But in that normality, they get education, medical, uh, therapy, and they learn how to apply for jobs. We teach them what to wear. I mean, I mean everything, soups and nuts that even most of us who came from the United States and maybe even good family didn't get the training on, which we needed. But if you can get that education, and if you can commit to something higher than yourself, then you will do more than survive. You will thrive, and thriving is the ultimate goal of any sex trafficked woman. She needs to thrive. You can't just lay on the couch and veg um, because you don't like yourself. Well, that's the first thing they will tell you is that you're no good. Of course, when they first meet you, they want you to fall in love with them. They see they are so smart. They know what you're vulnerable for, and they go after that. Once they get you, believe me, that real Louis Vuitton purse they brought you when they were first trying to court you, the next becomes what we call off the market, and they're not real. So, and then they put you on narcotics so you don't fight. I mean, you're practically a zombie. So part of what we have to do is deal with their drug problems. And they don't trust law enforcement, which is why over and over again, they bring someone like me in who will get down on her knees and say her name was Susan, the victim. I would say, "Hi, Susan. My name is Mary Elizabeth, and I'm you and you are me. We're going to work together, and we're going to make you better and well." And I tell people, especially attorneys, don't you dare promise to bring their lunch and not bring it. Because they're told that law enforcement and people who are out there to help you in the judicial system cannot be trusted. So if you make a promise, you better darn well stick to it. Um, you can't treat them like any other person on the stand because many of them are still children, even though they're women by age. So if I could say anything to help these young girls is that if they are going to leave home, run away from home, you need to sit down and explain to them exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get hungry. There'll be no shelter, and they will offer you anything. They will scoop you up like they scooped all the other children up. During the pandemic, what happened? All these kids on the street got scooped up in one day, never to be seen again. And if they'd only known what they were getting into, they might have stayed at home. And the parents need to have that conversation with them to tell them what's out there, what makes them vulnerable. If you have any questions, I will help you. I will help you in any way I can. So, I guess to conclude, unless Dr. Gopal or anybody has any questions for me, I just want you to know that I will do anything personally. I was interviewed 2 days ago. I gave my phone number, my email, and said, "Call me if you need help. I will help you." And I've already gotten several calls. So those are the kinds of people that I work with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is just the tip of the iceberg that you shared with us. There's so much more that you've been through, and we're very grateful for all the education and training you're doing for those who are trafficked as children. They don't have a voice, they just do what they have to do. And they grow
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
If they survive, if they're not dead by the time they're 20 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
if they survive, one of the biggest tragedies is the long-term care is just not available.
No,
Once
it's not.
we, once
Without
we,
money,
right, exactly. Please go ahead.
no, as I say, without money, if they don't have a family that supports them or an insurance policy, they will be dead. They'll take their own life because they make them feel as if this is their fault. Well, it's not their fault at all. They make them feel like they're worthless. They call them all kinds of names, which I will be very judicious and not mention them, but they're words that would make you cringe.
And yet you managed through all of that to climb through all the ladder, the rungs of the ladder, and reach and become the first trafficked victim who ended up becoming an EEOC judge, federal judge at that. And that's hugely remarkable. That is so remarkable. We're so proud of you. And we're so proud of the fact that you're willing to share and relive some of that despite the trauma, the secondary trauma you're now experiencing. You're re experiencing that entire traumatic experience while you're sharing this. And so it's very important that when those of you who work with survivors of human trafficking, work with refugees, and they share what the experience is because they want you to understand what they went through so
That's
that
right.
they can hopefully prevent one additional person from going through that. And I always say, if I could save one life, I feel like my talk was worth it. And so here we are with that discussion. And there's 2 points you made which I want to raise to the group here. The first is sex traffickers have no moral compass. They have none. So if you're trying to do therapy and treatment with sex traffickers, one of the things I have found when I talk to traffickers is they'll tell me, you know what, you can take this girl from me. There's 15 others I can get in a split second. It's not
That's
hard.
true.
It's
That's
not
very true.
I have a harem. I have 5 women in there. I had this happen, I think, a couple of years ago. And he said, I had a harem. I have 5 people here. You can take one of the women. I'll get 15 more. It doesn't affect my earnings. It's all about money in the end, correct?
Oh,
So,
absolutely. And the fact that they can use one woman 30 times in one day, that they can't, if you buy an AK-47, they have to replenish that costs them money,
absolutely.
not the woman.
And I think your message to all survivors is to become thrivers, not just to be victims and survivors, but become thrivers. And the way they do that is to get an education, commit to thrive, and then you can overcome.
Right. Just know, when I wrote my book, one of the things I said was, if I could take the debris of my life and fashion it in such a way that would help just one other person, then what happened to me was worthwhile.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Honorable Harold D'Souza from India, trafficked from India to the US, had an MBA degree, had a great job, but just wanted something better for his kids and his family. His wife and 2 small children accompanied him, and for the next horrendous number of months, he was trafficked as a labor in a labor trafficking world. He's a survivor of labor trafficking and appointed by 2 US presidents as honorary member of the Presidential Task Force on Human Trafficking. He is also the president, CEO of Eyes Open International, an NGO focused on eradicating labor trafficking. An epic Bollywood movie is being made on him and his story. He is a gifted international speaker, trainer, and dreams of beginning a shelter for male victims of trafficking, which he and I are working on quite diligently. And hopefully in Ohio or Chicago, we'll be open, or Indiana maybe, we'll be able to open that shelter. Honorable D'Souza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gopal, and I really salute Honorable Zoe and Judge, and of course our good friend Ashish. First and foremost, friends, I just would like to share that, like what Dr. Gopal said, that human trafficking or refugee or LGBTQ or sex trafficking is just the tip of the iceberg. And I will share the problems, solutions, and resources in the case of labor trafficking and debt bondage in the United States of America. Just to share with my viewers globally that how labor trafficking and debt bondage can happen to any individual, irrespective of caste, color, creed, gender, status, or nationality. So I was invited to the United States of America in the year 2003, and it just struck to me right now that the Ukraine war is going on with Russia, and similarly in the year 2002, there was a huge Gujarat violence. And I was a witness to that. I saw a lot of people being killed and burnt alive. And I saw that in front of my own eyes. A lot of my friends who were from different states just fled, left their jobs. And that was, I think, something that Ian shook me. And I think that was one of the things that inspired me, or think that, okay, I went to the US. I was invited on an H-1B visa. That's a work visa on a $75,000 salary per year, plus benefits. But friends who are watching this, I just want to share that how a person can become a victim of labor trafficking or debt bondage. Since the traffickers are so well intelligent and planned that they know the psychology of a victim. So I went on 4 things. I went on a trust, I went on a faith, and I went on a promise, and I went to live an American dream. But the day I landed, my trafficker asked me, Harold, are you carrying any cash? And I was carrying $1,000 cash. And he said, Harold, this is America. This is US. You cannot keep any cash with you. It is not safe. So give it to me. So I gave him my cash. I gave my documentation. But friends, that's a red flag. The biggest mistake I did on that very first day. But I came as a business development manager, but my wife and myself were made to work in a restaurant 7 days a week, 365 days. And within weeks, we were working for 14 hours to 16 hours a day. So labor trafficking in the United States of America, I have witnessed it happens at 4 places. That is at gas stations, convenience stores, motels, restaurants, and various other places like massage parlors, agriculture, farming, etc. This is a huge industry. It's a $150 billion industry after drugs. The risk factor is so thin, but the profit margins are so thick. And out of 10, I think we have survivors here today on this panel. Honorable Zoe, Judge, and Dr. Kalyani Gopal, who is an advocate, that out of 10, 9 do not get prosecuted, even today. And that is why we are trying to create awareness on this platform that traffickers and perpetrators should be prosecuted. Because when you save one victim, you save one survivor. But when you prosecute one perpetrator, you're saving about 100 victims. And that is what we should focus on. And in labor trafficking in the United States of America, you need 4 things to survive. For any common man, you need a state ID, you need a work permit, you need an SSN, that is the Social Security card. And number 4, most important, freedom. And in labor trafficking, like we have judge here, but in labor trafficking, there is one nickname. In sex trafficking, girls have different names. They are never called by their original name. But in labor trafficking, they'll call you illegal. They'll say, illegal, come here. They'll never call me Harold. And they don't call you once, million times. But what happens into your mind, body, and soul? You think you're a criminal. I just want to share that how one can become a victim of debt bondage. So my trafficker in the year 2003, in the month of August, takes me to a bank and tells me, Harold, you need to take a bank loan. And I never wanted a bank loan. He says, no, you got to build your credit. And in 2003, I'm coming from India. Everything was a cash transactions. I didn't know what is building a credit. But anyway, to cut the long story short, he takes me to a bank. I was in the manager's cabin, not here for 5 minutes. I signed a couple of documents. And within 5 minutes, I get a check in my name, which is of 5 figures. And my trafficker was a multimillionaire and driving a very lavish car, takes me to his house, multi-million-dollar house, pours a scotch in the glass and tells me, Harold, cheers. Let's celebrate. You're a rich man. But friends, before the scotch could reach my stomach, he removes a chit from his pocket and he tells me, Harold, you owe me this money. But friends, it was not $10,000. It was not $20,000. It was not $40,000. It was much more. And in 1 second, I lost 4 things. I lost my voice. I lost my courage. I lost my hope. And I lost my freedom. And before I could realize what hit me, He pats me on my back and he tells me, Harold, come on, let's go. You owe me much more. And I said, my God, what the hell like? But it didn't strike me at that particular time that it was a debt bondage. And next day, he withdrew all the money from my bank account. And why I'm trying to share all this is that recently, one family on January 19th of 2022 died on the border of US and Canada, just 12 meters away from the US border. Husband 35, wife 33, daughter 11 years old, and son 4 years old. They froze to death. They are from Gujarat. They paid $100,000 to come to the US undocumented or illegally. And that's the reason I'm trying to create awareness that do not enter the United States of America illegally. If you enter illegally, it is hell. If you enter legally, it is heaven. But you should have the resources available. You should know what are the solutions. And another small example, like we coming from a different country, maybe you're from Mexico, Guatemala, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Ghana, Uganda. We don't know the culture. We don't know the people. We don't know how this country operates. I never saw snow in my life. So comes December of 2003. It's a snow day. We are so excited. I ate a little bit of snow because growing up as a child, there was no refrigerator or running water in my house. So we get a note from the school teacher that both my sons cannot come to school if they do not wear a snow jacket. Now, I didn't know what is a snow jacket. But my chef, he bought 2 snow jackets. So that could have been a red flag in the school that there is something wrong with this family. Next day, we get a note from the school teacher that both my sons cannot come to school if they do not wear snow gloves. Now, they did have gloves from India, which was woolen. But these are some red flags that can be identified at a very early stage and can be rescued at a very early time. And that is what we are trying to create awareness today on human rights. Many individuals or victims do not know the human rights, that what rights they have. And that is what we have to empower and ensure that everyone is allowed to live their life happily and freely. My trafficker is so smart. They're 10 steps ahead of the law. They know what's happening. But then we need to stand up and fight because no one fights. Mine was the first case when I stood up and fought with the FBI for an H-1B visa. Comes 1 year, after 1 year, like he made my wife work. My wife was on an H-4 dependent visa. So she was not supposed to work. But he made my wife work intentionally and fixed her salary $2,000 a month. We were made to live in a 1-bedroom apartment very next door to the restaurant. Like I told you, these businesses happens at restaurants, gas stations, convenience stores, motels. And the traffickers or perpetrator will give you accommodation next door. So it's a very planned business. Because when accommodation is provided within the premises or next door, you cannot say I cannot come to work. It's a snow day or rainy day. So labor is available 24 hours. Lodging and boarding is provided, so you do not need salary. So they withhold the salary for minimum 8 months to 1 year. So for 18 months, my wife and myself, we were not paid any salary. And my both kids were abused. Physically, mentally, tortured by my trafficker. I never share, but I just want to share today on this platform to give an idea what happens and how a person like me can break down. What is my weakness? It's my kids. My trafficker slapped a full-fledged slap to my son in front of my own eyes. And what did I do? I just watched. I just kept quiet to teach me a lesson. And did my son do anything mistake? No. You do not discipline a child. You do not hit a child. You don't abuse a child, even if he or she has done something wrong. But when a child has not done anything, how can you slap a child? My son might have cried for 180 seconds. That's 3 minutes. But till I die, it's going to stick to my mind, body, and soul. So I always tell 3 things. People tell me, Harold, tell me something about yourself. I always tell, I'm a common man. I'm a failure and I'm a sinner. I failed on 4 P's. I failed as a parent, as a provider, as a protector, and as a person. But I just want to inspire all the victims, survivors, and vulnerable populations globally. That survivors can thrive and survivors should thrive. I flipped the 4 P's into passion, purpose, power, and prayers. So everything is possible. You can turn obstacles into opportunities. Failure is the path to success. I have failed million times, but every time I got up, I stood up, I dusted myself. I got abused. I got stigmatized. People spat on my face. But what happened? I said, that's fine. I accepted my mistakes. Every victim or survivor gets 4 things complementary, and they need to be checked. One is vision, number is dental, third is blood pressure, and fourth is diabetes. So anytime when you rescue a victim or a survivor, they need to be checked. And most important, that every survivor or victim should go through counseling. And maybe you might use a different word, because when you use the word counseling for a foreign national, and when my FBI agent told me, Harold, you need to go for counseling, I went mad. I said, what does he think? I'm mentally insane? I'm not mentally stable, because in India means you're gone. But friends, I want to tell, after I went for counseling, it changed my life. It changed my thinking. And today I am a happy man. And I still go for counseling today. To the Sisters of Notre Dame. And of course, we have Dr. Kalyani Gopal here. So I do even go to Dr. Kalyani Gopal at Chicago. And it really makes me feel good. And I strongly recommend that everyone should go for counseling. Even if you are not a victim of any crime. It always makes you feel healthy. You need to have a healthy brain, healthy mind. So I just want to give you an example how it changed my life. My counselor was half my age. She was a lady. And every time I used to tell her that I'm illegal, I'm illegal. After 6 months, she told me one word and changed my life. She told me, Harold, you're not illegal, you're undocumented. I said, wow, that means I'm not a criminal. Because traffickers used 4 words. I'll get you arrested, I'll get you handcuffed, I'll get you jailed, and I'll get you deported. And after 1 year, she told me, I used to feel so guilty. I said, what did I do to myself? It was a stigma, it was a shame. He told me, Harold, accept your mistake. The day I accepted my mistake, I changed. And I can see a classic example here about Judge and Honorable Zoe, sharing. It's not easy. It's very tough. It's very easy to preach, but very difficult to practice. There's so much stigma attached. There are so much hurdles attached. Like what Judge said, what Honorable Zoe said, that you need a lot of support from your own family, from your friends, from the community members. And when you don't get that support, it totally kills you. You'll not believe that my trafficker, to shut me down, I hired a guy to kill me. Right? So it's not easy. So when you see death, you forget everything. You don't want green card. You don't want your back wages. You don't want anything. You forget everything. Like what Honorable Zoe said. I was so traumatized. You're 8 months pregnant. You're climbing a mango tree. You're not trying to save your life, but you're trying to save the life of your child. I just saw in Ukraine, one pregnant lady die. And she was pleading that I die is okay, but save my child. But what happened in the end? Not the mother could live, nor the child could live. The doctors tried to survive her. So it really shakes us that we need to waken up and we need to rise to the occasion and see what we can do to help people. First in our own family, in our own neighborhood, and everything is possible. Every individual has the capability to change the world. Like what Dr. Gopal said, that today in the United States of America, there is no male shelter home for foreign nationals or even for the Americans. So we are trying to work to start a male shelter home in collaboration with SAFECHR, whether it could be in Illinois, Ohio, or Indianapolis. But then at least we are working on it. And we are trying to ensure that we can start a shelter home where even a person has no documentation. He's from Mexico, no passport, but he's a victim of labor trafficking and debt bondage. Yes, because safety, security is very important. And that can be given when we provide them a male shelter home. And that's why today in the United States of America, many victims are not coming out and sharing their story. So I'll not take much of the time because we have some time for the question answer sessions. And that's why I have started an organization called Eyes Open International, which is focused on prevention, education, protection, and empowerment. We have a regional director in Canada, Vienna Dixon. We have Rida Rawal in India. So friends, I just want to end on one note, that if you think that you are a victim of labor trafficking or sex trafficking in the United States of America, please dial or save the number on your cell phone. That's 1-888-373-7888. And the human trafficking hotline number in Canada is 1-833-900-1010. And if you have any questions and you need any help in India, please email info@eyesopeninternational.org. Once again, thank you, Dr. Kalyani Gopal. Thank you, Honorable Zoe. Thank you, Judge and Ashish and all my friends for listening to us. God bless you. God bless America. Mera Bharat Man.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're all such awesome, amazing, amazing people. And so powerful. I'm in complete awe of you, and I think our listeners are as well. We've been getting comments after comments about how much respect they have for you, and they're sending prayers your way. To summarize what you said, Harold, you said, they're stigmatized. When you're a victim of human trafficking, you're a refugee, you're stigmatized, and you're beaten down even further. But failure is the path to success. So you dust off your clothes, you get up again, and you walk back again. And your vision, dental, blood pressure, and diabetes, they have to be checked, and you have to get medical treatment. The one issue I've been coming across with every single survivor of human trafficking or every refugee I worked with is the issue of medical care, access to healthcare. And I think we need to have a law and even though Social Security is working with us on that, but we do need to have a law that if you're a victim of human trafficking, there's a specialized category that you fit into where you get free medical and mental health care, period. And I think that's one of the recommendations you're making. You all three have made the same recommendation, and we take that very seriously. So passion, purpose, power, and prayers. That's become the mantra of quite a few of your followers here on YouTube. And one of the issues that you raised is that instead of thinking of labor trafficking victims, instead of thinking of themselves as being illegal, they need to change the way they think of themselves as being undocumented. There's a big difference between being illegal versus undocumented, just in the world of trafficking, just in our field. And that dynamic, that perspective and change is, I think, what changes how we deal with the world and the community and the people around us. So thank you for those comments, because all about force, fraud, and coercion. And your story is so moving. All your stories are deeply, deeply moving, and your experiences are far more than just simple stories. Your experiences are deep, they're traumatizing, and yet you have come through and you continue to fight. I know each one of you, and I know you wake up every single morning fighting through your day to survive and thrive. And at this point, I see you all as thrivers, and I have the greatest respect. The panel is open now for questions, for any comments, and I'd be glad to take any questions on their behalf. So please post your questions. And while we are waiting for you to do that, Honorable Zoe, there was a question for you. And would you share with us what kind of support from your home country to your new country, what sort of support did you receive in that transition period?
I haven't received any support from my home country. As a political refugee, you cannot receive any support. I don't know what kind of support someone would have expected me to receive. I haven't. Rather, it was this host country which has given me that support through the churches, through the communities, by me joining the volunteer organizations where I have been able to teach in the communities, which has helped me and helped others. A lot of the public health programs, like self-management programs on how you manage diabetes, how you manage chronic diseases, how you manage chronic pain, and how you manage cancer or thrive and survive as a cancer patient. And then working with the elderly in the area of improving their mobility. And we have a training called Matter of Balance. Those are the things that have helped me to thrive and to survive. I didn't receive any help from my home country.
And I know you long to go home, even though you're
Because
here.
I have a mother. I have an aging mother. My father died. My mother cries every day, and I know that one day she's gonna pass and I may never be able to see her. That hurts me more than anything else. So I don't know what kind of help, because for improving and making a policy not to steal workers' money, if that is my crime, that has relegated me to this refugee status, so be it, Dr. Gopal.
You unearth a lot of corruption, and you're now paying the price.
Yes, I am.
You changed the treasury, and you brought in fourfold more money into the treasury, and for that you're paying the price.
Yes, I am.
And in this country that you're living in the United States at least, where you and I both are at this point in our lives, what is the message you have for the refugees in the Ukraine, in Myanmar? Let's not forget the other hotspots. We have refugees in Yemen. We have refugees in Myanmar. Ashish talks about 300,000 people being crammed into 100,000 space area with nothing in terrible and horrific conditions. How does the UN, how do member states, with all the wonderful SDGs we keep talking about, but obviously have clearly failed to honor as we should, despite our best efforts? And there are good efforts on the ground. Let's not minimize the efforts, but they're good efforts. It's just not enough. What is your take on how the Ukrainian refugees at this point, the Yemeni refugees, the Sudanese refugees, the Myanmar refugees, the Bangladeshi refugees, what is your message to the member states?
If people flee to your country, they are hoping that they are going to get safety. Please welcome them with open arms and ensure that they get their basic needs, which is housing, food, and safety for their children.
Yes.
Safety for their children. Women will always go back, like across those borders, and get killed going to look for food to bring for their children. They will get raped going back trying to get food for their children. So if they have a roof over their head, if they have access to food, if they have access to medical care and access to schools, eventually they will settle down. And the acceptance, like, don't call them, people call you a refugee. Yes, I'm a refugee. Or all those people fleeing are refugees. They have names. It's just like calling you illegal. You have no idea how much that hurts. I remember in Congo, where everything bad that was done by a refugee, even if it wasn't refugees. We had a hospital in Ariwara. I was there waiting to give birth to my daughter, the same daughter I climbed the mango tree with. And every Sunday they had a big market, Saturday and Sunday. And there's all these trees around the hospital, and the villagers and everybody who comes to the market, they don't go to the toilets or whatever. They go and they poop and they urinate in the bushes nearby. And the next day, the authorities say these were the refugees. They are the ones who pooped there. How do you differentiate the poop of a refugee and that of a national? So this blame game, kindly, please accept people, give them housing, give them medical care, and in the long term, if possible, give them citizenship, or in the short term, accept them. They have potential. You have people who are trained, they are doctors, they have been professors. I remember a couple I met in Chicago a long time ago. The wife had been a professor teaching in a university in Baghdad, and the husband was an accountant. They sent her to an American school, him to an American school, so that when they immigrated to the US, then his degree would be recognized, while the wife would go around hers and possibly end up in teaching in a university. They were putting in a dingy 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom house, no heat. It was winter time. Every time we went to the meeting, you could see the couple's eyes. They had never slept. It was red.
Wow.
And they were crying why they ever made that trip. And then they said this university was in Iraq, so his degree and credentials were not recognized, so he couldn't work here. So there's a lot that people have to work on. People's credentials, and not making someone who was a doctor, a professor, or what to go and clean toilets. You don't understand how this person, by running away, their self-esteem is already gone. And then you relegate them to those jobs where, of course, they have to do it because they have no other way of feeding their children. But pushing them like that, you are also destroying their self-esteem. People should understand these tiny, small things that can help people to thrive. The other thing I would like to say is, I hope we as advocates, our experiences can be able to influence policy in this country, particularly in the immigration sector, in the job and employment sector, and for people to be able to live as gainful and productive, not citizens, but part of the population. And when they gain citizenship, they can then be productive members of the citizenry. I think there's a lot that can be done by this country, which has a lot of potential. And we just need to make those little inroads in changing the policies and the way people look at refugees, in the way people look at trafficked persons, whether in the labor sector or in the sex sector. Is there anything else I should say, Doctor?
You can say that comes out of
And for the ones who were taken to this island, was it in Bangladesh?
Myanmar.
Myanmar. The UN and the countries know when you overcrowd people without services, there are going to be outbreaks of diseases. That's a disaster for cholera. That's a disaster for dysentery. That's a disaster for respiratory tract infections. You can't bundle people together without services. A place which is supposed to have less than 10,000, taking 100,000 or 300,000, it's like you're taking them to their grave. And when the outbreaks start, it will be hard. But I want to thank Doctors Without Borders, who have worked tirelessly, even in the most difficult circumstances. And I know for reason because I worked with them in the Democratic Republic of Congo, then Zaire. I also worked with them in Sudan, and I worked with them back when I was in Uganda. And the many other organizations like, the UNHCR with other agencies that work with them. We have just developed, I think last year, me and Dr. Gopal, a tool for identifying human trafficking victims. I hope that tool is going to be widely circulated, and I hope that all the agencies that are working with refugees, they will be able to use the tool to see the red flags which Honorable Harold was talking about, the red flags that there could be a situation of human trafficking happening in this fluid situation when people are running, like now in the Ukraine. We developed it and we have circulated it, and I hope people will use it. Because if we don't identify and prevent, then we will have problem in our hands. And like I said before, I hope we don't just talk and talk and talk. We walk the talk. It's time for action. People should start taking action. And just have a little heart for another human being. If you ever have a chance to see my YouTube by Oprah Winfrey, I adopted over 100 children orphaned by war and HIV/AIDS, because I believed that there must be, that a change could be created in the lives of those children by giving them a home, by giving them education. And today I'm a proud mother of doctors, nurses, lawyers, engineers, all the professions, even in the military and police, and even in the church as priests. You can always make a change. And if each one of us can touch a life, like Dr. Gopal said, we can indeed create a change and make this world a better one to live in.
Absolutely. And I think you speak from a place of trauma because right now Ukraine is in the news so much. And
Yes.
we hear about now we have millions of refugees. It was 1 million. Yesterday I read 3 million. So that keeps increasing. And we have babies that are in the rubble that have passed. Yesterday I was communicating with the Ukrainians in Poland. And as you know, Honorable Bakoko and I have created a screening tool for human trafficking for those who are refugees or have been displaced individuals, so to speak. And the question I was asked is, we've identified a trafficker at one of the checkposts. What do we do? How do we save these women? Because like all of you say, it's jobs. They're offering you university education. They're offering you a roof over your head. Many, many, many families that are offering a roof over your head are wonderful people. But there is a proportion within them that are not wonderful people and that are traffickers. So the question is, how do we identify the traffickers? So I connected them with the local OCSE group. It's a European group that's on the ground. And we're hoping that we give them not only this questionnaire, which they're all using at this point,
And the
but
training.
36-item screening tool, spoken like a refugee would want to be spoken to versus you and I talking to each other. And it's a very, very basic, fundamental needs assessment. What do you need? Who is doing what to you? How did you come to this country? How can we help you? How many people have you lost? Did you have to give up an organ in order to come to safety? What happened? Did you lose a child to sex trafficking because one child had to be given up in order to keep the other children? There is so much that's going on the ground, and I'm working very, very closely with them, especially the mental health group, trying to train them to ask these questions. And I'm so proud of all the NGOs that are trying. But like Honorable Zoe, it's just not enough. We need to do more. Each one of us on YouTube or wherever else we are listening to this, and this recording is going to go to the highest levels that we can send it to. We request all of you to be accountable. We have to be accountable. And the way to be accountable is to have checks and balances. We sign treaties. Those treaties have to be enforced. It's not enough to have a nice, pretty signature from member states. Those treaties have to translate into actual enforcement. We need to empower our displaced persons, whom we call refugees. And I'm with Honorable Zoe in that the term refugee, it just makes them feel so isolated and so alone. But if you say you're displaced, you feel like, wow, I have a home. There's a home somewhere I can go back to. I'm just displaced for now, but I can go back home. So we would recommend that the term refugee be replaced with displaced persons. And another recommendation is that as mental health practitioners, let all mental health practitioners use our tool when they're working with displaced persons. Not only there, but you can also use your tool in the US, in India, in any other country. We have people from Indonesia, we have people from China, we have people from Europe on this call. Use this tool, because if you come across a displaced person who's living in another family, who's living as a guest with another family, ask some simple questions. And if you find that you're getting suspicious, report it. And we are more than happy to provide you all the numbers you need so that you can report it. And I want to move to all three of you and ask you all this one question. What is the role of border enforcement in situations of conflict? And all of you can respond to this because you're all involved at different levels with the border security. So how do displaced persons, how do those who are trafficked coming to this country, how are those who are labor trafficked coming to this country, how do we empower border enforcement, border control in different countries to actually identify victims of trafficking? What is it they need to be looking for?
Well, let me tell you, in the United States, there is a misconception that the traffickers pick up the men, the children, and the women through the border. That's not it at all. They already crossed the border, and they're in here. We have no holes barred now, and we let anybody through, and that's problematic. So when they're going back over, it's easy to spot it. The child will, look down, the arm, they will have a very tight hold on them. And if you manage to make eye contact with the child, I usually go, help, do you need help? Some way of communicating. But then I'm the kind who steps in. I'm not going to call law enforcement because by the time they get there, they're over the border. And that's too late. But you can see when someone's being trafficked. They know it. You know it. There's certain actions. Like I've talked to Uber drivers and other people and said to them, "Do you ever pick up people who are sex trafficking or labor trafficking?" He says, "All the time." I said, "How do you know?" He says, "Their actions and the way they hold on to people, the way the other person will not look up, the trafficked person will not look up or into their eyes." But for these Uber drivers, there isn't anything out there for them to call. So by the time they get them to the airport or whatever, it's, they've lost them.
What are your thoughts, Harold, on that?
I feel, Dr. Gopal, is that whenever you call for border patrol or anybody is coming to any other from any other country, I think everyone is a human being, and anyone could be in that situation or in that position. So how would you treat yourself? Even if I'm at the border patrol and I'm the person, how would I treat myself if I was in that person's shoe? Because it could happen to anyone. So I think we have to do three things. We should be loving, we should be caring, and we should be generous.
They need to be taught that.
Yeah, I think this is natural. We are all human beings.
No, immigration, customs, and enforcement, they need to be taught that, because I know a lot of people who do that at the border, and they let them pass. They don't really look.
Dr. Gopal, I think the most important thing is to train the border patrol people to be able to have their eyes and to see the difference between a person who has been trafficked and person who is genuinely a refugee or a displaced person, whatever they want to call them. And like Harold is saying, and that it's very important. It's there, but for God's eye. Put yourself in that person's shoe. Their training is to enforce the law. And so they will just enforce the law. And sometimes there's no compassion in enforcing the law. So if they have training and they can understand the difference between people who are being trafficked and those who are not, then they could maybe with compassion, love, and care know how to handle another human being. But most importantly, they will be able to detect and identify people who have been trafficked. So training is very critical, and we have to continue with advocacy, and they have to change some of their policies in how they handle these issues at the border. That is my take.
Thank you very much. We're still accepting questions, so please bring your questions in. Meanwhile, I could talk to the three of them forever. So we have time to actually discuss some very important issues that we didn't have a chance to do during their presentation. But we do want to bring up some really clear behavioral indicators. So the Department of Homeland Security has what's called the Blue Campaign. And under the Blue Campaign, they have little pamphlets that they give at the border. They try to distribute the border enforcement. They try and train the border enforcement as well. But these are some pointers. These are some suggestions they say look for behaviorally, even before you talk to these individuals. For example, does the person appear disconnected from the family or the person they're with? Has the person had a dramatic change in behavior? Is the person disoriented or confused or showing signs of mental or physical abuse? So frequently with our kids who are trafficked, you will notice that they are with that individual, but a natural mother-child bond that you see, a parent-child connection, is just not there.
Sure.
It's not there. So you're looking for that fear, you're looking for that sense of disorientation, you're looking for the sense of disconnectedness between that person and the person they're with. And that's where mental health practitioners really come in, because they're trained to look for behaviors, they're trained to look for these sort of behavioral signs. So it's very important that at any checkpoint, you have not only medical personnel, you have
But
law
mental
enforcement,
health.
but you also have mental health advocates trained in human trafficking. Trained in human trafficking. Very, very critical. That is another recommendation we're making. And also, you're looking for a submissiveness. There's a very strong submissiveness in children and youth who are trafficked and adults who are trafficked. There's a lack of eye contact. There's an inability to actually hold themselves up. There's a sense that the relationship between the two is so disconnected that you see this person is just submissive, going through the motions. It's almost like being a robot. And you'll see that happen because, like Judge said, you don't know who's coming, which car is coming up to you, who you're going to be going with. You just go through the motions, and your face, your expression, there's none. There's none. All three of you have been threatened with your lives. All three of you, and many, many more beyond you. Those out on the streets, those out there at checkpoints, those out there in our neighborhoods. The fear of being killed is so strong that the survival instinct kicks in, and you do what you have to do. So these are some of the signs. And you also look for dehydration. You look for malnutrition. And it just doesn't come from having crossed the border. There's a stronger, the person with you looks healthier than you. Why would the person who's been through the same exact experience as you have look that much more healthier than you have? Maybe you're more resilient, that's a possibility. But then you've gone through similar experience. Therefore, the chances are they look as broken down, as dehumanized as you are, is going to be higher. That's another way to see if you're being trafficked by that person. So those are some of the major signs we look for when you're looking for trafficking. And when we had this refugee screening tool, someone asked me to put that up, so I'm putting it up again. I'm not sure why is it showing clearly? Because I can't read it. Here. There you go. Thank you very much, Hriday, for putting that on the screen. I actually want to thank Hriday for setting up this whole session with you, because we are able to all be on the same screen. We're able to see each other and talk to one another and not get Zoom bombed, which would be quite dehumanizing for us as well. So thank you, Hriday, for that, and Bharat FM. So, Honorable Zoe, what's your take to that question? The question where the border security, what else can they do?
Besides being trained, I think, like I said, there should be change to policy on how law enforcement handles situations. I think if they are trained using these tools, or if they have addition, if they are extra personnel, like the mental health therapists, or if they have medical people who are always there, but probably not people who deal with mental health. Now that we know there's a lot of mental health crisis, even everywhere, I think it's time the policies change and they become part of the staff who are at the border to look at the influx as people come in and cross borders. And
Absolutely.
just treat people as human beings, just treat them as human beings foremost, and then go screen them. And if you identify criminals, that's fine. But just to label and assume everybody is probably gonna be a criminal and have that mindset is just going to create a different situation. And it is time that this cord between traffickers and powerful people, that cord be cut. Because traffickers get away with so much because they are connected to powerful people. So I think that cord has to be cut.
I think therein lies a very critical comment where the collusion between traffickers and those in high places, even with the border security, as amazing as their work is, every single profession has their bad apples. And that collusion is what we are come up against, which is why this happens. But I agree with all that you've said. I'd like to move to you, Harold, and talk to us about labor trafficking and how it is gendered, and how can we prevent vulnerable individuals from being trafficked? What is it we need to be doing differently?
I think labor trafficking can be stopped by number one is education, enlightenment, and like what you're doing today, this program. Like I always tell that in the United States of America, Dr. Gopal, you, me, and all of us cannot stop labor trafficking. Because if we need to stop labor trafficking, we need to go to countries like Mexico, Guatemala, Uganda, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and tell people that do not come to the United States of America undocumented, paying the agent, or if you're coming on a B1, B2 visa, come, stay, and go back. Because most of the people are manipulated, tricked, and trapped. And they just don't know. Like, I'll give a classic example, Dr. Gopal, is that C1D visa. I'm trying to work on an expungement for victims in the case of labor trafficking. And I find so many applicants who have come on a C1D visa and they're paid agents back in India and they're jumped the port and they're working in restaurants, gas stations, convenience stores, and motels and various other places. But this visa can never ever be corrected, even if you are married to an American. And there are so many people who are married to an American, are staying in the US for the last 20 years, having kids, but they didn't know. So I think education is one of the key factors, Dr. Gopal, on that. And number two is that like starting a male shelter home will give a lot of courage for a lot of victims here in the US because they need safety and security and stability. And then today also we do not have data in the case of labor trafficking in the United States of America. The reason no one is coming out and sharing and talking only for four factors, like I told you. The traffickers use four words: I'll get you arrested, handcuffed, jailed, and deported. Yeah, thank you.
So, what do you suggest we do to get data? If we do
Dr.
an absence, go ahead, Honorable Zoe.
I was just going to add to what Harold has said, that there can be a way of reducing or minimizing labor trafficking. If countries can make their labor exportation laws, a labor exportation law, which I made for Uganda as a labor minister, so that people are officially, they go on official exportation of labor. Countries can sign agreements, bilateral agreements between themselves. Right now, I can give the example. In the US, there's a huge shortage of nurses and healthcare professionals, even mental health care professionals. There are countries where you have these professionals, and if there was official importation of labor, then we would not have this situation where traffickers use the loophole to take advantage of people, even professionals. And so people would come through the official way, work and go back, like Harold is saying. And that is possible. But countries in the West have to take away the fear that people want to come to their country and stay. Like during the COVID, the UK government had to come out, the parliament had to come out with a law to say we have to allow to recruit nurses. And if this happened in the US, then I think there would be official ways of people coming to work here instead of just people having to find ways to come in or traffickers trafficking people in. That was just an addition I wanted to make.
And that's a very good recommendation. Thank you very much.
Dr. Gopal, I just wanted to add one thing. At our borders, We have the Immigrations, Customs, and Enforcement, but everybody comes in. They recognize the exoticas, the Syrian terrorists, the gangs that come through. They let them in no matter what. There's no stopping them. There's no medical unless an ambulance is called. The borders are just a free for all, and that is the real tragedy. Is that as a country, we should not be letting terrorists in. That's my way of thinking. We should not be letting gangs that are known for sex trafficking in, because they will leave with children and they won't be stopped because they are so busy just trying to monitor it that they don't really have the time. They need more manpower. They need different manpower, as you said, psychologists, family counselors, people who are in the sex trafficking, labor trafficking industry who can spot a problem and get those people to the side. Of course, immigration, customs, and enforcement officers would do that, but then they would take them to you in a room where you would be able to talk. It has to happen. You just cannot let people come through. Anyway, you can't.
Okay, thank you very much. We were supposed to end at 11 o'clock, but this discussion was so important and so timely and so critical for all those who are wanting to know more that I wanted to continue this till we have more time. But are there any other comments? Any other thoughts that you all have? Because this has opened up a Pandora box for all of you as well. So I want to take a moment to just have some silence. Let's breathe as a group. So breathe with me. You're going to be breathing in, counting to 7. You're going to hold for 4. And you're going to breathe out, counting to 7. Through your mouth. The comment that was made that we just need to breathe is a very important comment. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to breathe and we're going to make sure that your voices are heard by everyone. That was a promise we made in 2014 when we had a panel of 6 individuals, right, on the screen. And we had 6 people who heard them. And the next year in 2014, we hosted a conference where the whole world heard those very same voices. Your voices are important. Your voices are critical. You are being heard. You are being listened to. And your frustrations are very, very, very real. And your pain is truly real. So we'll take all of this, all of those who have listened in, all of those who are going to listen in, and all of those with the power to make a change. Let's promise each other that we will all work together to make that change. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on this panel. Thank you for giving me your time, giving us all your time. Honorable Zoe, Judge Bullock, Harold de Souza, you are terrific, amazing, incredible human beings, and I love you so much.
We love you back,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Gopal.
Gopal.
Bye.
Bye-bye.